By the end of the 1970s, the most American machine ever built had become a national joke. People called it the Harley-Davidson, the hardly drivable. They said its motorcycles leaked so much oil, you could track one down the road by the puddles it left behind. Harley-Davidson, the company that had survived 2 world wars and the Great Depression, was now losing money, losing riders, and quietly running out of road. And the thing that nearly broke it wasn't a Japanese rival. It wasn't a recession. It was a bowling company. This is the story of the decade that almost ended Harley-Davidson and the 13 men who bet everything to buy it back. And it starts with the most American idea of all, that bigger is always better. To understand how far Harley fell, you have to understand what it was. Founded in a tiny Milwaukee shed in 1903, Harley-Davidson didn't just build motorcycles. It built the idea of American freedom on 2 wheels. It carried soldiers through 2 world wars. It was one of only 2 American motorcycle makers to survive the Great Depression. By the 1960s, the deep rumble of a Harley 5 twin was the sound of the open road. And in 1969, that image hit its peak. A film called Easy Rider put 2 riders on chopped Harleys, crossing America in search of freedom, and turned the motorcycle into the symbol of a whole generation. Harley had never been more iconic, which is what makes the next part so strange. Because that exact same year, the family that had run Harley for 66 years sold it, and the buyer didn't make motorcycles. It made bowling pins. The buyer was called AMF, American Machine and Foundry, and AMF was a conglomerate, the kind of company 1960s America loved that swallowed up unrelated businesses and ran them all the same way. It made bowling equipment. It made tobacco machinery, bicycles, even parts for nuclear reactors. And now, it made Harley-Davidsons. On paper, it looked like salvation. AMF had deep pockets, and it wanted to grow Harley fast. So it did what a conglomerate does. It chased volume. It nearly tripled production. It pushed final assembly into a sprawling new plant in York, Pennsylvania, far from the old engineers back in Milwaukee. The plan was simple: build more Harleys, sell more Harleys, make more money. There was just one problem with building them that fast. The quality fell apart. Pushing the factory to its limit while slashing the workforce to cut costs, AMF was building bikes faster than it could build them right. Motorcycles came off the York line with parts missing, with bolts loose, with oil leaking from the day they were new. The defects were so common that dealers had to take brand new Harleys apart and rebuild them before they could even be sold. Owners gave the company brutal new names: Harley-Abelson, Harley-Drivable, Hogley-Ferguson. The proud old nickname, Hog, became an insult. And AMF, tone-deaf to the end, stamped its own initials right on the fuel tank, next to the legendary bar and shield. For a generation of riders, that little AMF badge wasn't a logo. It was a warning label. The brand built on trust was now built on a punchline. And it could not have come at a worse time. Because while Harley was falling apart, Japan was taking over. In 1969, the very same year AMF bought Harley, Honda had launched the CB750, a motorcycle that changed everything. It was fast, smooth, reliable, and cheap. Soon, Honda, Kawasaki, Suzuki, and Yamaha, the Japanese Big Four, were flooding America with bikes the press called simply the Universal Japanese Motorcycle. Next to them, an AMF. Harley was a hard sell. It cost more, it was slower, it handled worse, and famously, it leaked. Riders who once would have bought American looked at a Honda that started every single time and never left a puddle on the driveway, and they switched. Harley's share of its own home market collapsed. By the end of the 1970s, the company that had defined the American motorcycle was by most accounts weeks away from going under. By 1981, even AMF had seen enough. The bowling company wanted out. And that was the opening a small group of Harley executives had been waiting for. 13 of them, led by a tall, pipe-smoking engineer named Vaughn Beals, and by Willie G. Davidson, the grandson of one of the founders, decided to do something that looked almost insane. They were going to buy the company back, themselves. They scraped together the money for a leveraged buyout, borrowing against the very company they were buying, and in June 1981, they purchased Harley-Davidson from AMF for around $80 million. To celebrate, a group of them rode their Harleys the long way, from York back to Milwaukee, and they coined a defiant new slogan, "The Eagle Soars Alone." They were finally free. They were also broke, buried in debt, and still building the same bikes nobody wanted. What happened next became one of the great turnarounds in American business. The new owners knew they could never outspend Japan. So instead, they studied it. They toured the Japanese factories, including Honda's own, and they discovered their rivals weren't winning with some secret magic. They were winning with method, with relentless quality control and a system called just-in-time manufacturing. So Harley copied the very companies that were beating it and rebuilt the way it made motorcycles from the ground up. Then they made a bet on the past. Instead of chasing Japanese style, Willie G. Davidson leaned into everything that made a Harley a Harley: the retro looks, the rumble, the heritage. And in 1984 came the machine that made it real, a new engine called the Evolution. It kept the classic V-twin soul, but it finally ran cool. It ran clean. And most important of all, it didn't leak. For the first time in a decade, a brand new Harley was something to be proud of. There was one last piece. In 1983, Harley had convinced the Reagan administration to put a steep tariff, 45%, on big Japanese motorcycles, buying it precious time to recover. And recover it did. So completely that in 1987, Harley did something no rescued company had ever done. It asked the government to lift the tariff a full year early. "We no longer need the protection," it said. "We can beat them now." And it could. Harley had become more than a motorcycle again. It had become a movement. The company turned its riders into a club, the Harley Owners Group, and its rallies, like Sturgis, into pilgrimages. People didn't just buy a Harley anymore, they joined it. The brand grew so protective of its identity that in 1994, it even tried to trademark the actual sound of its engine, that lazy, loping potato idle. They were trying to copyright the sound of their own survival. So what really almost broke Harley-Davidson? It wasn't the Japanese. It wasn't even the leaking oil. It was an idea. AMF looked at Harley and saw a product, something to be optimized, accelerated, and mass-produced, like a bowling pin. And by treating a legend like an appliance, it nearly undid the one thing that made the legend worth anything. The 13 men who saved it understood the opposite. They knew a Harley was never really about being the fastest or the cheapest or even the best-built motorcycle on the road. It was about what it made you feel. So they stopped trying to make Harley efficient. And they started making it mean something again. The bowling company tried to turn a religion into a product. The comeback came from turning it back into a religion.